for 21 years, things were not, there was no hope really. We need to put an expiry date to blaming the absence of our father, to blaming those that did not play a part that we expect them to play, and start owning up to our lives and start making decisions that are going to make us better human beings. And spending 21 days in a psychiatric hospital without any psychotic symptoms was probably one of the best times of my life.
Have you ever wondered how writing can support your well-being? Join us on Grafto, the Power of Writing podcast, where we explore the transformative power of words. I'm your host, Alina Maraghelis, and together with our amazing guests, we'll delve into the world of writing and its incredible benefits. Today, we are joined by Kabelo Chabalala, a writer and founder of the Young Men movement. Kabelo published his memoir, A Journey from Boyhood to Manhood, where he shared his personal story of growth. So, Kabelo, welcome. And let's start with your inspiration. What prompted you to write your memoir? And when did you realize that your story needed to be told?
I think there's just quite a lot of things that were happening in my life in the past 10 years or so. And critical to it was the absence of my father, which I think, as I grew up in that very same village in South Africa, I realized that there is a need for us to be there for the young men that have absent fathers and the young men that feel like there's nobody who's giving them an ear to listen to. So in 2021, I woke up one day and I thought, you know what? I've been to many different platforms, television, schools, but there are other boys in far off places, remote villages, where I can't really reach them. But there's something I can do that might actually travel further than I have, physically and otherwise, which was to then say, let me write the story of my life for the past 30 years, and as far as and as early and as far as I can remember, which was when I was 4. And I think through that I realized that it may be my story, but a lot of people growing up in the different parts of South Africa may relate to it, and subsequently get to a part where they get to realize that really fatherlessness and a little bit of hopelessness here and there should not really be how your story or your life story ends. And that's how I got to write the book. I thought it was an important and critical contribution towards helping young men to relook into their lives, helping the next girl child or boy child or an adult also to start to have a reflection on their lives and find ways to ensure that they look at life even better.
And thank you for that. And I love in your book how actually at the beginning of the book you mentioned how you were taking full responsibility. You were not a victim, so you want to write a different story for yourself. Although you grew up without a father and in a certain in certain poverty conditions. So tell us a bit about that, because I think that attitude is very inspiring.
Look, there's a quote, and I think it's attributed to an unknown person, and it says that you're born looking like your father, but you die looking like your decisions. And essentially, what I deduce from that is, it's easy to blame everything. It's easy to carry the "I am the victim" mindset, and trust me, to an extent, you are a victim. The fact that your father left you makes you a victim of fatherlessness, right? But at
Yes.
what point do you put an expiry date to blaming the absence of your father, blaming the absence of your mother, blaming the non activity or active parenting from everybody around you, your grandmother, your uncles, your aunts? You have to get to a point where you say, okay, guys, I understand that you had to do what you had to do. And I'm also now an adult. And when you're an adult, you think like an adult, you decide like an adult. And I think that was the turning point, to say that I can't. For all my teenage years, there was a lot of I'm the victim. There was a lot of who's going to help me? Who's going to help me? But now you are an adult. You get to not ask anybody to leave the house. You get to go vote for the first time. You get to make decisions on your own. And some of those decisions might end you in jail, depending on what you really get up to. So I had to start owning up to my own story and to say, okay, I've been a victim and I am a victim and I'll continue to be a victim for as long as my father is absent. But I need to start taking full ownership of my life because, sadly, to South Africa, 63% plus of girls and boys grow up without their fathers. So that was also equally a reminder that I'm not special. I'm not an anomaly. If 67% of us are without fathers, really, I need to really wake up and smell the coffee and start to own up my life. And that's pretty much what I did. We need to put an expiry date to blaming the absence of our father, to blaming those that did not play a part that we expect them to play, and start owning up to our lives and start making decisions that are going to make us better human beings.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's very beautiful said, Camelo. And what would you like people who perhaps relate to your story to take away? How would you like to inspire them?
Look, one of the things that I've always say in the different platforms, whether in a room full of men, whether in a room full of boys, or room full of both, is that it's not what I went through is not a doctrine. However, it's relatable in a sense that we do have people growing up without fathers. We do have people who tend the corner. So it is to say, look at my life with really hardships. You know, when we talk about the odds stacked and orderly stacked against you, you go to your prerequisite to a university or college. And then at that point, you realize that, oh, I've been in school for 12 years, and now that it's the end of me being in uniform and having a teacher sit in front of me. The next stage of my life requires quite more. It requires financial assistance. It requires taking up opportunities from wherever that they could be presented. It requires really layers and layers. And at that point, that's when you realize that what I'm used to as a normal life has to change. It's either I'm going to be sitting at home every day, waking up, bothering the elders, and taking a nap during the day, or tend towards drugs and alcohol, or just have a meaningless life. Or I'm going to look at what's around me and realize that the poverty, the lack of a father, the lack of resources is not the end of my world. It means I need to dig deeper. And sometimes digging deeper means looking deeper into yourself as to what am I capable of? What can I present before people that is going to make them realize that I have potential, and that somebody, if one person and just one person could just invest into that potential, I could become somebody else. And thank God that was my aunt, my mom's sister, who looked at me and said, you know, you have potential. And if it means investing that you go to college, let's do that and see what would come out of that. And I took that on and I became even more responsible. And not only about her and about the money that she was spending on me, but for me to say that I'm given this one chance of going to school, coming back with a qualification, and seeing if that one opened other doors for me. And I cannot afford to mess it up. I had no time for any other thing. You know, varsity is it's a time where a lot of people tend to just misbehave, ask for money that they don't need, lie about needing a textbook that is already there, make up stories that about trips that don't exist, just to get an extra cash, just to fit in, just to become part of the cool gang, just to become part of everybody. And I had no time for that. I couldn't afford to lie to my parents. I couldn't afford to make up stories. All I needed to do was just to get good grades and get out of that. And pretty much that's how my life turned around. My third year, I became a student assistant, effectively being an employee of the institution, and I never looked back. So for 21 years, things were not, there was no hope really, except for the little hope that lied inside with the little boy who always believed that I think I'm not here for nothing. I think there's something inside of me. But I mean, now I'm 33, and you look back and you realize that life can never be linear. So you have to go through a little bit of challenges here and there so that at the end of the day, you can look back and draw lessons from that, share those lessons to others, remind, the community around you that, look, we're not all going to grow up and have a mother and a father who's going to afford to get us the Nike Jordan sneakers or afford us the coolest and the most recent PlayStation. But even if that's not the case, it doesn't mean your life is without purpose. Your purpose might actually be really rising like that feelings from those ashes where everybody thought you're gone and you're done. So I think that's what I want people to draw, that it's not a doctrine, but it is life lessons that remind all of us that we need to start somewhere, we need to turn a corner somewhere, we need to remember that there is a purpose that we need to serve. And later I realized that, in fact, if there's somebody who is suitable to go out there and remind other young men and women that your father's absence is not the end of your life, it's me, because I know exactly what it feels like. So you take those very same lemons and turn them into a lemonade. You turn that situation and you become an ambassador, you become an activist, you speak so well about us empowering boys, you speak so well about fathers being present, and you're not just saying it because you're observing it in society, which is also good, but you're saying
Yes.
it because you know fully what it feels like to not have a father. You know fully what it feels like not to have a father figure. You know fully what it feels like to grow up in abject poverty.
Yeah, so you've been through that journey yourself, so you have the credibility in a way because you know what was it like, and also you managed to turn it around for you. And you mentioned in your book seeking therapy. And I remember your sister had a funny reaction. And it would be great if you could share a bit your experience, because I think we need to break down a bit the stigma around mental health, especially for men. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think just to quote her verbatim, please don't come back crazy. That's my
Yeah.
sister. And I think she, being somebody that works within the health space, right, and having studied psychology and to a degree, I think she, and psychosis also as part of her studies, she was just worried about how sometimes an environment turns you into something that you're not, and just to caution me. And I think she was better. My mom was just really, really, really
Right.
not quite well. She was just worried. You are crazy. Is that what you're saying to us? That I raised somebody whom is not, and for me it was sad. You get to realize that even your own can actually feel embarrassed and ashamed of you. But mostly men. I mean, we look at statistics that speaks to a lot of suicides that take place. You get to realize that there's a lot of bottling that we do as men. There's a lot of not talking about how we feel, not talking about where we are, not talking about our mental state, and being open about it. But equally, men are not kind to one another, which is another layer to it. That you find a brother and you tell them exactly how you feel. The following day, the very same deep and almost secretive information that you share with them is turned into a joke. But I had to do it for myself, and spending 21 days in a psychiatric hospital without any psychotic symptoms was probably one of the best times of my life, because through the occupational therapy sessions, I got to know and find out why I do what I do and how I do what I do. So one of the things that I learned during my schooling days was that I was very competitive. And I never understood what was the trigger for me to, when you are unnecessarily competitive, but it was always to try and hide the shame, try and hide the poverty. So, yes, I can't produce the newest Louis Vuitton pair of sneakers or Levi Strauss pair of jeans, but I can show you that I can perform very well in class. And that's something that you can't really take away from me. It may not be tangible, but I think if I do that, if I run on a track for 100 meters, 200 meters, you see the excellence. You see somebody wanting to really come out there as number one. But you become competitive even in a workplace, because I was that kind of a person who would want to do outstandingly before everybody, where sometimes there wasn't really a need. So 2018 was a turning point for me to realize that, oh, So I've had this competitive edge because I'm trying to cover up for things that I don't have. And even when you have them, you still continue to cover because now you're employed, you're in the mid-senior space, you're doing very well in your career. There's really no need for you to be showing up as anything else. But because that is so entrenched in you, you keep doing what you're doing. And from that, after that 21 days, I started just you go out to do quad biking with your friends. You just want to be number one. It's not necessary. You're not really enjoying the ride on a quad bike up the mountain and down the mountain. Your focus is, I want to be number one. You understand? So I started
Yes.
living differently because of how therapy helped me to say that it's not even about finishing first. It's about enjoying what we're doing. And interesting enough, 3 months after getting out of hospital, I had to go to Helsinki in Finland. And while we were there were quite a number of activities that we started indulging in. And that's when I realized that, oh, okay, we had to run to get a prize. I'm very fast in my running, but I couldn't really care about being number one. And that's how I started seeing myself turning a corner. That's why I started realizing that the absence of my father really affected me, but I managed to turn that into positive energy. And as scientists would say, energy never lost, but it's transferred from one point to another. So the anger, the bitterness, and everything else was turned into this beautiful platform called the Young Men Movement to say that if I really know how it feels to not have a father, and that really almost killed me, I must take that energy and create another platform for those that are feeling the way that I felt, or worse, so that I keep on being that daily reminder or inspiration for them to say that, look, it's not the end. Yes, he's not there.
Yes.
Yes, it's the end. But that's not the end of your life. If anything, it might be the beginning of a new chapter. But equally, for us to be the next generation that is going to be responsible fathers, the next generation that is going to be active parents. And I think I also try my level best to do that to my own kids. So that's how I would look at it.
That's wonderful. And what advice would you give to perhaps other men who might be hesitant to, to seek professional help?
If we could just think about ourselves and not what the next person is going to say. And the next person could be your child, the next person could be your spouse, the next person could be your friend, the next person could be your sister or your mom, like in my case. But you need to just put yourself at the center of, I'm not doing this for your approval, I'm doing this for my own well being. And if you are at the center of the why, then I think it makes it easier for you to go ahead and do it, to answer the why am I doing this. And you always have to be the why I'm doing this. And you become better. You assess your life even differently. You start seeing triggers, you start seeing triggered people, you start seeing signs of what is wrong and signs of what is right all around you. And obviously, one of the things that my psychologist said when I left, and this is before signing me out, was, look, you have changed, as in we have equipped you better to handle your world. But the one thing that has not changed is the world that you're going back to. And that was so powerful because I then had to adjust to the fact that the same person who would ask for things, even though they know that I'm not in a position to provide for them, will continue doing exactly what they're doing. But it's my responsibility to say, here's a boundary, here and no further. The same aunt, the same uncle, the same friend, the same boss will demand that you stay in until late and forgetting that you got there at 5 a.m. and they want you to leave at 10 p.m. It's my responsibility to say, hey, I got here at 5. I'm going to leave here at 4 o'clock because I have a family to see. I have children that also need my attention. My life is not all about work, but work is part of a life. It was those kind of changes and that kind of information that helped me to go back and start setting boundaries and sticking them out. Because if you don't stick them out, you are going to probably get worse and go back there needing other forms of attention. So yeah, I would really remind them to think about themselves and how if they are better, if you are a father, you become a better father. If you're an uncle, you become a better uncle. If you're a husband, you become a better husband. If you're a boyfriend, you become a better boyfriend. If you're an employee, you become a better employee. If you're an employer, you become a better employer. So if you go out there and seek the help, the whole world around you, especially your world, gets to benefit from such.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a bit now about the process of writing. So how was it like for you was it therapeutical to write? And also, were you
Yeah,
keeping journals?
the process of writing is because even during my high school days, there's always been that encouragement from the teachers to say, your comprehensions are so beautiful. You must just become a writer or consider writing in your future. So over the years, you start writing from scribing in your little notebook, but also afraid of how people invade children's privacy, parents, sisters, uncles, brothers alike, friends too. So one of the things that was always a concern for me is how somebody may release or talk about something that I wasn't ready for. But when I started having access to a laptop as an employee for the first time, I'm like, yes, now this is something where I'll put a password and I'm not going to share it with anybody. And whatever that's in there is going to be safe. And then we move to clouds. Now things get even more better where whatever that you want to write, you can just throw it there and then you move. Sometimes, in most cases, I would write and just delete it because I just wanted to vent, and paper and pen is what I know. Take it, pen it, or type it, delete it, that type of way. But the book was quite interesting because I started writing the chapters as you see them in the book. And then after doing that, I'm like, okay, which chapter might be easy to start with? Then I started writing the first one about my dad. Difficult, but also easy because I'm like, let's release this anger and start writing. So it took me literally 7 days to write about 39,000 words.
Wow. And
Yeah,
was it therapeutical for you? Because you mentioned, also when you're angry. Tell us a bit about that.
it is. And I think I love the fact that writing helps in both ways. When you're happy and when you're sad and when you're
Yes.
angry, whatever emotion that you have, it sort of helps you to reflect on what you are feeling, and sometimes also helps you in how you're going to communicate it to the next person. So you get to say, yo, is this really how I feel about what my wife said or my boss said or my friend said, and do I want to communicate this or not? And if I want to, is this what I really want to say, or there's just another diplomatic way of putting what you need to put, also depending on the relationship. So it is very therapeutic, and it's also just sometimes makes you appreciate that aha moment. So if something
Mm.
great happened, you just passed your grades, your bar, whatever the case, and you just write about, I'm so happy that I managed to finish this degree. It's been such a long journey, but now it means more doors can open. So I wouldn't suggest people to just write only when they're angry. I think even when you're
True.
happy, you get to really also get to understand or appreciate the journey that you've been through in achieving whatever that your goal was. So it helps in both ways. It makes you see, or helps you see, how beautiful a journey it was. It also helps you see how angry or not so angry you are, or whether it's something you need to communicate or not.
Yeah, so it shows us a bit emotions, right? Whether we're sad, happy, angry, they're just our emotions. And looking at them, it helps us understand ourselves, I think, a bit better. And then also, as you're saying, choose, how and if we want to communicate those emotions at all. Because sometimes they're just emotions, right? So sometimes it's not about communicating them, it's just about us releasing them. They
Yeah,
might be memories, they might be
yeah.
triggers.
100%. And I mean, you reminded me of how one of the other things that also made me realize that I could write a book. My first exercise when I was in hospital, my psychologist said, I'm finding symptoms of like anger, and I want you to go write a letter to your dad. And in 2018, it was just the year after he had passed. And she said, I know he's no more, but if he was to read it, I want to just know how it would look like. Got an exercise book, went in. I think I started writing after dinner around 6 o'clock, 3.5 hours into it. I was sitting at about 15, 16 pages. And that's how I knew that this was quite serious. And I go back to see her the following day, and she asked me, "How's the exercise going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm done. I finished this morning." It's like, "Huh? You're what? You're done? How long is it?" I said, "About 20, 25 pages." He said, "Are you insane?" I said, "You don't say that to people in this hospital." But anyway, that was just me picking on her. But she said that it does help, that, and the point of that exercise was to write it and destroy it, so I didn't have to keep it.
Yes.
I only had to rehash it when I had to write the book, because it was pretty much everything that I had written while I was in hospital 2 years later. But it was just to get a sense of how deeply angered are you. And as I was reading out to her, she realized that, oh, you had a turning point where you start realizing that it's not a you thing, it's not an anomaly. So if it's not an anomaly, it means people still survive. And then you start reading about people who made the world great, and their fathers were absent, and then you're like, okay, so I'm not the only one. So I cannot at any point want to build really a castle on the fact that my dad is not around, because you really don't want to live in such a place. So that's how it really helps. It helps you release those toxic feelings that you might have, and helps you just regroup and find new meaning to probably
Yes.
even a long existing challenge or problem.
I love your attitude and how you managed to turn around this pain, because I'm assuming it has been very painful, and how you managed to, to go through that journey. And I could feel that in the book as well. You go through different stages of, sometimes you're angry, and it's okay, you're entitled to be angry, and then you get to the phase of acceptance, and as a result you manage to turn things around, and that's wonderful. I hope more people would be inspired, by your journey, Cabello. And we
Yeah,
need more people like you, because I know the wonderful movement that you do with, the young generation that you're mentoring. So that's wonderful. And I loved your vulnerability in the book as well. You shared your emotions. You were very, I would say, transparent on how you were feeling. And that was very beautiful. And you were
yeah,
mentioning at some point when you had a turning point in your career and you decided you want to do something else. So tell us a bit about that. What was that experience like?
yeah. And I mean, before I get to that, there was this point I was really in contention with myself, obviously, around, are you if you're writing this book, you're either gonna be honest or just don't write it at all. You're either gonna show the vulnerability or don't write it at all. I'm not good with filters unless I'm at work and I do public relations and I need to represent a company. But if it's something that I feel it's important for us to be open and honest about it, that's exactly how I'm going to approach the situation. And I think the going back home and the difficulties was that you're going back to a place that you thought you wouldn't go back to, and then you remember that a restart in life is also not the worst thing that could ever happen to you. So it was difficult, because these are people that have mocked you. These are people that said nothing is really going to, your life will never turn around, you're never going to become anything. But what they were not aware of was that those were my own decisions. Nobody forced me to go back home and go do what I wanted to do. But you also don't go and broadcast why you do what you do. A lot of them felt or thought that I lost a job or I had done something bad at work, but it was really none of that. I felt that I've been on this journey for quite some time and it's not fulfilling me. I need a new challenge. I need a new direction. I don't know what that looks like, but what I know for a fact is that I need to take a different direction in my life. And that's also scary on its own, especially where, and that's how I also measured that I had healed from my own childhood traumas, because earlier on in my life, my childhood traumas would inform me that I need to get a permanent job, stay there until I get old and get gray hair and retire. But as you go and as you heal, you then realize that Okay, but what is life without risks? What is life without taking the unknown road and untraveled path and just discovering a new world on the other side? So I think that bold step was also a result of a healed somebody who's saying, yes, I know I
Yes.
vowed not to leave a job, yes, unless they really kick me out and unless the company closes. But here was a young man who said, I don't care if you guys say I don't have a car. I don't care if you guys say I'm jobless or whatever that you want to conclude. What I do know at this juncture is that I'm changing directions. So it was more of the liberation that comes with healing. It was more of how therapy helps in you realizing
Yes.
that you have nothing to be afraid of. And I jokingly say I was saying this to a cousin of mine the other day who she feels like she wants change in her life, but she doesn't want to. She's in a permanent job, but she doesn't want anything contractual. And I said to her, for all you know, you might be left with just 5 months of your life. And I didn't mean it in a bad way, but the point I was
Of
driving
course.
to her is just live your life. You might be worried about a future that you're not even going to see. Leave it for now. You're not making any irresponsible decision. You're just saying you just want change. Go for the change. Yeah, maybe not a 12 months contract. Maybe go for 5 or 3 and then take it on. Don't worry about a permanent post because the future that you're worried about really it's not known to any of us. And I think tomorrow has enough worries and problems of its own. Ours is just to focus on now. Ours is really to focus on how do we become better people. I mean, South Africa is
Yes.
currently and the world observing 16 days of activism against the abuse of women and children. So in a space where we still have such big problems as society, how do we all in our little corners make sure that we make a difference? How do we all in our little corners make sure that tomorrow becomes a better day for people because of our little contributions? And I think for me, that is how you arrive at purpose. That my
Yes.
life has a bigger purpose, and I need to contribute towards that every day. And fatherlessness has turned into an activism that I'm really proud of, and also in my own space to my own children, try to be present and active and make sure that I'm with them and not parenting them from the pain, but parenting them from the understanding that it is important and critical to be present in their lives because every child needs their father and their mother to just grow and be, healthy in the many ways. So that's pretty much how I think the journey has helped me to come into this full cycle of understanding that it was really all part of a big mysterious plan, and now you start living a purposeful life without really stressing. But even at this stage, I mean, I went to therapy around June, July, just to check in, just to say, hey, I just wanted us to have this conversation. I'm married, I have kids, I have a job, I have boys that I mentor. I just wanted to check if I'm trying to balance everything out and it's balancing well. And I left, and the psychologist after 3 sessions was like, you're good to go. I don't want to see you again this year, maybe next year. But for now, go run with what you need to run with, and we can do another check in. And that's the other important part of therapy. You don't have to go there when things are terrible. And you don't have to wait for things to get messy. Sometimes just go there so that you find ways to avoid things getting messier. So for me, I think it has grown me so much that I know that I'm not gonna wait for things to go bad. Even when I'm uncertain of the direction, I'm just gonna go do a check-in to say that, do you think I'm in the right space to make this type of decisions? I've done 1, 2, 3, and I want to do 3, 4, 5, and then they go like, yeah, 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 not bad decisions at all, and you seem like you're on track. So we need to treat it like cars. I always
Yes.
say that a car reaches a number of kilometers for service or a year. It's either
Yes.
or. Kilometers or a year. And it doesn't mean they're going to change everything, or it doesn't mean they're going to find a fault. Sometimes they just change their oil filters and then they tell you that the car is okay, you can take it back. Sometimes they tell you need to change all four wheels, 4 tires, you need to change the brakes, the float, and sometimes it's really bad, but sometimes it's really just normal things that they need to change here and there.
And it's about focusing on our mental health. And those could be, yes, going to therapy, writing, exercising, all these elements of, focusing on ourselves and our well-being. And you mentioned there about pain and, how you help your children. And I think this is what therapy does. It helps us understand that pain, it's part of life. We are just avoiding to feel it. So we just kind of create coping mechanisms to go through that. Once we start to understand and not avoid those feelings, then somehow it gets easier, right? It gets to the acceptance.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Kabelo. This has been wonderful. And thank you for your vulnerability, honesty, attitude, and for all the work that you do. And in closing, perhaps you can tell us what advice you would give on embracing writing for personal growth and well-being to our listeners.
Yes. Look, I think personally, and I think my journey is also a good one. I'm not writing to be the best author or to have the biggest sales in South Africa or the world, but it's about the message of hope, the message of yes, you can, the message of you too can turn things around. And I think people need to know that their stories are important, and the uniqueness of that story or those stories can help change someone's life. And I think where you are bold enough to put it on paper and go public with it in a form of a book, it being an autobiography, it being a memoir, go for it, because somebody needs to hear your story so that they can move into the next step of their life.
Yeah. And also writing, right? Just write to look at your emotions, write to
on your phone,
feel different.
yeah, on your phone, on a paper, whatever that you feel comfortable with. I think just write. It's therapeutic. It's one of those things that you don't have to pay anybody to get done.
Yes, and it's that focus on our well-being where where you've very beautiful put it throughout all this interview that we had. Kabelo, thank you. It was a joy and pleasure to have you on our first episode, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the amazing work that you're doing in South Africa.
Awesome.
And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Alina.